Tuned in to that PRAYzy station, PRAYZ.FM, where we get our praise on. 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Hello, everybody. It's that time of the week with your girl, Dr. Drea. I'm in the house tonight for the Momentum Shift. I'm so excited to have you guys join me every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. here at PRAYZ.FM Radio, where Dr. Lady Rain is making it rain in the Valley of the Sun here in Phoenix, Arizona. For those who don't know, we are on Mountain Standard Time here in Arizona, where we do not honor daylight savings time. I'm not sure why we don't. However, share. If your friends are not on live, invite them to come into the room. I can't wait for this discussion. I've been looking forward to this. We've been having so much going on. Y'all, if y'all don't know, Pastor, I almost called you Dr. Aubrey Barnwell. I know that's coming though. That's coming. If y'all don't know, this man right here, I don't even know how to say it, but this man right here has been everything from the first time I ever met him. He knows no strangers. He and his wife, Pastor First New Life. I don't know, y'all Baptist Costal.
We are Baptist Costal. We used to be Missionary Baptist, but we dropped the Missionary Baptist, and so now we just First New Life Church.
They First New Life Church. You know what? I've had the pleasure of being there. I've had the pleasure of hearing him preach. I listen when I'm on my way to my church. I listen. Other times of the day, we listen, and that's one of the beautiful things that happened with COVID. You know, I had already jumped in. I didn't even say hi to nobody. I got so excited, I forgot where I was. Y'all, me and all these jobs. I just told them how this thing is going. Let me give a couple shout outs before we get into it. Hi, Tamara Chase, all the way from Long Island, New York. I actually met her on my classmates program during women's, I can't even remember what month it was. What was the month of March? Women's something month. I can't even remember. Wow.
Right.
Elena Clark, Pastor Deborah Bell, Julie McIntyre. You know what? You guys are coming in every week. Hi, artists all the way in Valdosta, Georgia. We got the East Coast crew on the line tonight. It's right. Oh yeah, they come in regular. They come in. Y'all keep sharing. This is going to be such a good discussion. For those who have not voted yet, I'm gonna look on the flyer because I'm gonna get it right. You know, like they say, you know, we're not gonna get into that where, you know how we do. We don't remember what the scripture said, and we just don't want to pick up our Bible and read it. I'm gonna pick up my flyer and read it. How about that? I'm gonna pick up my flyer and I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna read it good. See, just because I said that, I can't even find it on my phone. We made it to round 2. She's gonna put it on the screen, but we made it to round 2. PRAYZ.FM Radio I'm prophesying we will be nominated for Internet Radio Station of the Year.
That's awesome.
2022. I'm claiming it. Last year, we didn't quite win the award, but we did get the nomination. We were at the Stellars last year. I will be at the Stellars this year. I'm declaring and decreeing we're gonna be there in the house. I think it's the weekend of July 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. It's them days, those days in the ATL. Y'all want to join us out at the Stellar Award? Pastor Deborah, you need to come. Hi, Lynette. I'm telling you, no, I didn't forget you, Dr. Lady. How am I going to forget you, Dr. Lady Rain? And you, see, this is what she does every week. See, she'll do this stuff, and then she makes it seem like I'm lost it because it makes it look like to y'all I'm talking to myself. See, so Pastor Aubrey can attest to it because he can see on what's going on the other side. She think I forgot, but I have not forgotten. We're gonna do behind closed doors segment with Dr. Lady Rain. She think I'm joking. I'm not. Yes, March was Women's History Month. Huh? You know what? I told her sometimes we gotta do like Tyler Perry did, how he did with the have and the have-nots. He just put it all down in one episode. He killed everybody. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you created this cliffhanger and then get people on the edge of their seat. I I wasn't even watching. That's what's so bad about it, Pastor Aubrey. I'm gonna tell you a little secret about your friend. I don't watch soap operas.
Okay.
I used to back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I used to watch Days of Our Lives, Young and the Restless, all of that. Just like everybody else. Hey, Carmen, come on in. Y'all keep inviting people
As
in.
the world turns.
Oh, I used to watch it. Another World. My grandmother watched. That was the soaps. We had a system.
Right.
Young and the Restless.
Uh-huh.
Then the news came on because I was on Central Time. So the news came on at noon. And then right after that, you switched over to the other channel and you watch Another World. You watch Days of Our Lives, Another World. Mm-hmm. And then some people watched other stuff. It just depends on what you did at the latter part of the day. So I grew up watching them just like everybody else. But them haves and them have-nots, I was not having it. I wasn't getting caught up in it. So when it was live and folks was posting on Facebook and social media, they mad. I didn't know who any of these people were. But I got bored. Not really. But you know how you on Hulu or BT Plus or whatever. Right. And I said, well, I watched one episode.
And that's all it takes.
Then I watched another one. Then it gets so interesting. You just want to watch it just to see where he going with this.
Right.
So I get tired I was binge watching it. I had used up all my data, just binge watching it over the weekend. I'm in the car because I was just curious to see where it was going. Man, oh yeah. Julie mentioned General Hospital. I didn't watch General Hospital. I know a lot of other people. I watched all my children for a little while. But, you kind of watch the ones you grow up with. Yeah, I watched that too. Who Shot JR? Yeah, all the cliffhangers. But Tyler, all of them, Knots Landing, you name it, we watched them all. Anything that came on primetime, because first of all, we only had 4 channels for the longest before cable came around. So you was gonna watch whatever was going on primetime, and that included 60 Minutes, World News Tonight. You didn't have no options. It's either you watch ABC, NBC, or CBS, or you watch PBS. That was it.
That was it.
But all of them had an S at the end. So it was some alphabets and an S. But anyway, yeah, I told her sometimes we just have to do like Tyler did and just kill everybody in one episode. Killed everybody. I was like, no, he didn't. I guess he got tired and said, I'm done. The only person that lived was Hannah. That's it. So for anybody who hadn't watched it, don't y'all.
And she was the only saved one, so that's
well. Yeah, but it's funny how in one episode though, it wasn't even a lead up to. He just got tired. It's like Tyler woke up one day and said, "I'm done with y'all. I'm shutting it all down." So he killed everybody in one episode. I was so mad. All the people who had been, I'm late. I came late. I was tardy to that party. I was way tardy to that party. So I was so mad because I'm like, why didn't y'all tell me? I couldn't get my time back. I was so mad because it was just starting to get good. And then he got rid of everybody.
Yeah.
So having said that, I just told Dr. Lady Rain today in a text. I said, sometimes we got to do like Tyler and just kill everybody. Now there's a few more shows. I wish he would just kill all them people and end that. He hadn't done it yet. I'm like, just let the people free. Let's do like Moses did. When he went to Pharaoh, he said, please let my people go. There's just some people, I wish Tyler would just let them go. Because some of them shows.
Yeah.
He's doing way too much.
I think the only other, because I watched the Have and Have Nots. I don't know that I don't think I've watched any of the new ones. My aunt was watching them, but I just never got into the other ones.
Neither did I. Honestly, when they were on, people were currently watching them. I didn't. I never, because I don't really have time. It's just one of those things. I was just, how you go on Hulu and just kind of tired of watching the same old stuff. So I started watching a couple other things. But and it's funny because we talked about historical stuff, things we followed, which kind of really leads me into some of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Is because I know you have a legacy that you're working. And for those who don't know, this is Pastor Aubrey Barnwell. He is I call him a famous man. He's a celebrity here in the Phoenix metro area. His dad was definitely a trailblazer and a celebrity here in his own right. There's plenty other pastors in the community, in our African American community here, who are outreaching. If you ever watch the news here in the Phoenix metro area, if you get it, you at some point you're going to see Pastor Aubrey Barnwell on the news. I know you're sitting there like, I'm not on the, yeah, I've seen you on the news. And I don't hardly watch local news, but I've seen you on the news. And the part of the reason for that is because they are doing, hi Jeanette, you guys come on in. They are doing community outreach and activism. And so he is a prime example of how to do this and that at the same time and do it effectively, which is part of the reason why I invited him on. I asked him if he had some burning thing he wanted to talk about, and he said, no. So I'm going to flow with this tonight. So I hope he'll come back on my show after tonight. But I hope and pray so. Hi, Nick. Come on in. You guys keep sharing and inviting.
That's my daughter.
That I thought so.
Yeah,
I thought so. Yeah. It's really exciting. And Lady Linda, oh man, if you ever heard her sing, oh my God.
She's working on a project, so it should be out. Hopefully, we're thinking by the end of May.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to have her come on back on so we can talk about that. I will tell you, that woman can set an atmosphere. My gosh. All I can say, you invite her, you want to have church. They have church over at First New Life. I watch, and sometimes I'm like, oh, no, they did. You know how they have that shoe spirit. I want to just throw a shoe. Yeah, that's what they do over First New Life sometimes. I'm just like, they just do way too much.
Yeah.
But Pastor Barnwell, kind of tell us a little bit. I know COVID, we've talked about COVID. People probably tired of talking about COVID. Well, COVID is it's here. I'm praying that it go away because I'm tired of it, honestly. I think we all have COVID fatigue. Mm-hmm. As a church, how did you guys manage that transition? Because there was lots of things going on at one time. You had COVID happen, and then you had the whole thing with George Floyd. And how did you manage all of that as a pastor and a community activist? I'd be curious to know how you navigated through that.
Pastor Drea, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you. I just, I love your testimony and everything that God has done in your life. And so I'm excited about it. Of course, our connection with Bishop Robinson, always, it's just amazing that what all he did through his life. One of the things that happened to me prior to COVID, I had started wrestling with this ideal that church was not going to be the same. I was wrestling with this fact that I didn't see church, and I couldn't articulate what I was seeing because I couldn't understand it. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I knew it was going to be different. Statistics has shown that there has been a drastic reduction in church attendance and even church participation. There's still this sense of people who have faith who are still having a spiritual experience, but not in that formal or structured kind of environment. And knowing that, it was sort of how we deal with children and youth and the things that are happening. I could just sense that there was something shifting. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just knew that something was getting ready to happen. As I thought about it, years ago, I'd been exposed to a conference that I went to that talked about the change in our culture, which meant that we moved from people wanting to be entertained to people wanting to be involved. They wanted to participate. So at that time, that's when we started seeing all the reality shows. And so we went from a whole lot of, like we just identified, a lot of soap operas to reality shows where people could vote, where they could have say about what was going to happen and who was, just a lot of interaction. And I realized that church had to do the same thing. church is going to have this opportunity for people to actually interact. They weren't going to just come and sit and listen. They wanted to participate. They wanted to give input. They wanted their voices heard. And so in that, we had already begun. We had been doing streaming via Facebook Live for a number of years. We had started when it was not, the popular thing to do, and everybody was, throwing stones at Facebook. I had already gotten familiar with Zoom. Zoom, I became familiar with it. It started using it for a number of applications as well. And so as we moved through that process, it was pretty much an easy transition. I'll tell you what happened though. I was in school. I was going to Seattle University, and I had gone up in January. I came back, I flew up, and I ended up being in the San Francisco airport. I'm in the San Francisco airport, and there are people with masks on, and there's people with no mask on. And so I'm confused about what's happening
I remember
here.
that. I remember your post on Facebook about that.
And I'm thinking, what's happening here? Is there something happening, or is it something not happening? I couldn't figure it out. Went there, came back. When I came back, I got diagnosed with pneumonia, and I went to the doctor. The doctor said, I need you to be on bed rest, isolated for the next 15 days. And I said,
15.
is that for my benefit or for other people? He said, well, this virus that's coming out is really, that was like in February, right? Before we had the shutdown, the major shutdown. He said, it's for your benefit because you are, you're susceptible to it, to the virus. So it's best that you stay shelter, locked down. It's like, okay. So now I'm telling the congregation, I caught us. So what do I tell them? Because, by this time it's not real popular, but there's some rising. So as we go through that process, I now am watching, because I couldn't go that Sunday, I'm watching online. So I'm watching live, and so I'm getting this preview of what we look like. So I'm saying, okay, there's some things we can do. So I'm preparing for this, and I didn't realize maybe 3 Sundays later we were on complete shutdown.
Wow, that's powerful. You talk about being on the cutting edge of change. You end up being in the cusp of it. You're coming back on the cusp of it. You're coming back from school. You have a layover in an airport that leads to a whole situation. So God had already given you a preceding word about it. And then he allows you to see it not only prophetically, the pre part, but you got the pre-show, and then you got the pre-show.
Yeah.
And so coming in an environment where, okay, yeah, it's one thing to Facebook, to stream your services live while people are in attendance. That's one thing. It's a whole nother thing for the pastor to have to say, I'm not really sure what or how, in your mind, even if you don't convey that, but even saying that to God, like, okay, God, what do I do with this? How do I communicate this? And like, what are you doing?
Right.
Because even though he shows you a part of it, he doesn't show the whole part. So it leaves it up to us to try to figure out, okay, how to shift, which is, I always have people on the show because it's about shifting our momentum, because we had to do that a lot.
Right.
Over the last few years, and the things that used to work just are not relevant anymore. And so how did that work with your congregation when you first gave that news?
It was interesting because my father pastored for 40 years. And so I have his congregation, I have the congregation that came under me, and this new congregation. So all three of these generational congregations, I should say that way. I'm concerned about the older generation. the younger generation, they're tech savvy. You know, they'll find it. We are able to do that. But my older generation is what my concern was, and so I'm trying to determine how do we make sure that they stay whole? How do we make sure that they stay connected? We started Bob Talk, which is our it's sort of a podcast online. We use Facebook and YouTube Live as well. But what we did was, it was designed to help us to stay connected and to deal with some of the issues of disconnection. I believe what Scripture identifies and supports is that we are to be fitly joined together, meaning that it is necessary that believers stay connected. And in this environment, there was a temptation to become disconnected, to not really have the intimacy that we so desire, and that we crave for. We want to know, but we also want to be known. And so how do you do that? I went through a number of opportunities to determine how do we do this. And so there was a way that we tried to do it through email, through text messages. I ended up with a caller. It was called Multiplier. I started sending out messages. It was so funny because members were so excited. They heard my voice, especially my older members, because they pick up the phone and they was like, "I heard you, Pastor. I'm so grateful," because they hadn't heard or seen me. And so that was part of understanding that my whole quest was to stay connected to the body and keep the body connected one to another, because the temptation was so great to get isolated, and in that isolation becoming depressed, even depressed and despondent, discouraged, all of the things that go along with that. So it was really a push to make sure that we did that. And I found just creativity, just doing everything we could to make sure we stay connected, identifying, preparing for whatever was next. So we went from a praise team and a message to, they said we couldn't do it at anything. Nobody could be there. So then how do we do this? So we ended up having stuff online and people teaching from home and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it definitely brought out innovation in the, I would say, across culturally, but in particular the black church culture, because one of the things about our faith and community has been intertwined. Even people who didn't necessarily worship God in the sense that we think of worshiping God, there was always this connection within the church, the local church, though. That was the place of gathering. That's the place where people went for information. That's the place where they went for assistance. That's the place where they went.
Yes.
If there was a problem in the family, if there was a funeral, if there was a this, and if there was a that place was the community connector.
Yes.
And different churches, maybe different pastors, but especially if you were in a particular denomination, pretty much all the pastors knew each other.
Correct.
They would come together when it was needed, maybe not on an every Sunday basis, but when the need arose, they would come together. And so after the break, let's talk about a little bit about how let's swing back and then move really forward, because as you said that, it made me think about how your dad and his legacy and the legacy you're carrying forth about bridging the gap here in the Phoenix metro area from the ministry standpoint and the cultural standpoint, as well as political structure.
Right.
And how we're dealing with that, because all of it is intertwined, from COVID, even before COVID, but all the way forward. So right after the break, you guys don't leave. Stay on the line as Pastor Aubrey Barnwell shares with us what God has done and yet doing in his life and through his ministry. We'll be right back.
Have you ever wanted to host your own inspirational radio show? Have you been called to inspire and spread God's word? Please contact DCRA for more info.
Hold on one second.
Are you the next great independent artist? But you're looking for a distribution opportunity? Well, sign with us at PRAYzy.FM Music Distribution. Yes, the 2021 Stellar Award nominated PRAYzy.FM can handle it all. We understand the narrow road leading to getting your music heard at the right time at the right place can be tough. So send your music and video files to fmprayz@gmail.com. That's fmprayz@gmail.com. PRAYzy.FM Music Distribution, affiliated with Sony Music and the Orchard Distributors.
What's up, y'all? This is Khalil Lundy of the Force MDs. I would like to announce our gospel station, Praise FM, y'all, as a candidate for the 2022 Stellar Awards. Go to Radio Ballot and vote station Praise FM in the category 5 at www.stellarawards.com.
Welcome back to the Momentum Shift. I am in the room with Pastor Aubrey Barnwell here at Phoenix, Arizona, here on the Momentum Shift. I am so excited to have him here. He is sharing how his quest, how God, I'm going to call it quest for change, because God started using you as a change agent. In fact, he's been using you and your family as change agents your whole life, whether you wanted to be or not. You were born, like they say, the Church of God in Christ, you can't join it, you got to be born in it. So Pastor Barnwell was born into this legacy, and we are talking about how God started shifting things even in 2019. And it's interesting you should mention that, because he had started tugging on my heart about some things related to church and how, you know, we needed to make some adjustments, at least in my own particular life. I thought it was just for me, and it was an individual thing, not realizing that it was actually a corporate thing that he was doing. And I hate the fact that people have lost their lives. Don't get me wrong. I am not sensationalizing COVID, because there's been lots of loss, and lots of families have lost people, loved ones, and different ones to COVID. So we are not downplaying that by no stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, let's continue to keep others in prayer, our family members and others in prayer, because this COVID thing, like I said, it continues to linger. Whether we're wearing masks or not, whether we're in person or not, whether, you know, because a lot of jobs are going back. As a matter of fact, today, I think it was today or yesterday, I forget which day, they removed the mask mandate at the airport.
Right.
In airplanes. See, so that's going to shift things as well. See, so there's so much going on.
Diversity over that.
With that, Pastor Barnwell, just dive in and kind of let us know, like, what, like, fast forward. I know we did, the COVID thing happened. You had to make that adjustment. Then the George Floyd situation happened, and that shifted the entire world all at once. How did you navigate through that and kind of move us forward with the organization you're chairing and that kind of thing?
So you really made before the break, you were talking about pastors need to be connected with one another. And years ago, they had what they called the Ministerial Alliance. And the Ministerial Alliance, really in almost every city where there was an African American population of any substance, had a Ministerial Alliance where ministers came together. A lot of that was around civil rights and making sure that the voices were heard from the community through the pastors, that they were connected. The pastors, the leaders, were the voice of the community. They were the individuals who were free to be able to speak without retaliation for the most part. And so we had a Ministerial Alliance here in the Phoenix area. And much of what happened during that time, once civil rights was, desegregation and all the things that took place, then we moved into here in Arizona, we were dealing with the Martin Luther King holiday. It became one of the major things we tried to do. We're the only state that had to have it actually put on the ballot to actually make it a holiday. And so we had to, because it was voted in, and then the governor at the time vetoed it, and so they had to go through this whole process. In that process, they brought pastors together. Pardon me?
I remember it made national news. It was a big thing, even with the NBA and different things. I do remember.
Right, and the Super Bowl boycotted because we didn't have the holiday. In that process, though, one of the things that was key was that the clergy, the pastors, came together. They came into agreement, and that gave strength to the movement, but it also gave strength to the pastors, that they were not alone. In that context, the praying together and sharing and growing together through that process, there was bonding that took place. In about 2002, because there was no real central focus to focus on, that Bishop Thomas, pastor of the Pilgrim Rest Church at the time, identified that he could not make the changes in the community that needed to be made just from one church, even though it was one of the largest churches in the valley, that it was necessary for pastors across the valley, across the city, to come together in order to make changes, to have our voices heard with a number of social issues. And many of those issues came out during COVID, right? We began to see what the impact was from a health perspective, from a mental health perspective, from economics, and all of the things that came along. It became, those disparities became known. And so he brought us together, and so he started the African American Christian Clergy Coalition back then. And they came together, we prayed together, we did a number of social issues. Unfortunately, he passed suddenly in 2018, and Pastor Stewart then took over. Pastor Stewart, for the last 4 years, we had a number of things during his leadership that we were able to accomplish coming together. Again, because of COVID, before COVID, I had implemented, I was the director of operations for it. I had implemented us doing meetings on Zoom. So we were doing Zoom before Zoom was the thing. And so I remember when we started having shutdown, that was the one place that all of the pastors, regardless of where you were in the world, in the country, could connect. And we came together and talked about what we were experiencing, the challenges with preaching to cameras and not to people, the challenges of even after COVID, having people come back in the process of that and being able to share that. And I think that as we shared those things one with another, it became less of a stressor for pastors, but also to recognize things have changed. And so we're moving in that direction. So now, this past Friday, I am now the chairman for the African American Christian Clergy Coalition. It's about 130 churches and clergy who are part of the organization. Our goal is really to enrich the lives of the pastors and leaders. We're not restricted to pastors, so it's all clergy, whether it be evangelist, prophet, teacher, whatever your licensure is, and African American. We look at civic engagement, a number of issues that we see with voting rights, with criminal justice reform, a number of things like that, even with climate change, and we're looking at that now. We deal with education and what we need to do in the education field when we have these things that are coming against us, specifically trying to whitewash our history.
That's become a huge thing. And in particular, my son is 21, so he actually is a product of the Phoenix Metro school system. And I can't speak for every district, but we live out west. And so they didn't really learn anything about our history in school. It's practically non-existent anymore. Just like physical education is not something that kids automatically do. We knew you were going to do PE. That was just part of the curriculum. Everything has changed. And for people who may or may not be engaged in that part of life anymore, either because your kids are grown, or maybe you didn't grow up here, maybe you grew up in the dirty South like I did, where you knew that most of our churches were not culturally, what's the word I want? They weren't segregated, at least growing up. Pretty much that was the most segregated day of the year. And it still is a Sunday. But for the people who may think like, okay, where does race and religion connect or collide? What would you say to them? Because the Jewish faith has always come together. The rabbis, the synagogues would, different cultures, the Catholic faith comes together. And what people don't realize is that the people of faith, even though this is African American specific topics, but it's not like you guys are not connecting with other clergy of faith. You know, on the outside looking in, it may give that appearance, but that's not the truth. So could you shed some light on how cross-culturally people of faith have been interfaith? They're intermingling and doing things for the community, whether it's affecting their community directly or not. There's partnerships that's happening. How would you address that?
So what I would say, first of all, my father was one of the key individuals to help me to understand what it really meant to be cross-cultural, to be interfaith, interracial, if you will. My father died in 2017. About 3 or 4 years before he died, I found out that as a child, as a young man, he watched a man be lynched while he was standing in his grandmother's house. So he's looking out of his grandmother's kitchen window and he sees someone who's lynched. When I found out, I realized, I said, I couldn't understand why he wasn't more bitter, why he wasn't more angry in regards to white people in general, that I never heard him talk negatively of them. In fact, one of the things that surprised me was we were part of American Baptist churches, and that is a predominantly white organization. And he was president of what they call the Black Caucus. And I remember asking him, I said, so why do you need a Black Caucus? This is a Christian organization. Why do you need to have a separate organization for blacks? Because shouldn't everybody be equal? Is it, you know, why we have this separate thing? And he said, son, he said, there are some really nice white people. They just don't know that they don't know. And so we have to come together to let them know what our needs are and what our challenges are. And that's why we come together. So it's not that we are anti. We just happen to be able to come together to be able to speak to the issues that you are blind to. And that's really what the AECCC is about, is that there are issues that we're blind to. I think when we start realizing, I became aware of some of my personal issues have been around male privilege, because I didn't know I had male privilege. And when my wife or I go into a place, if I go in, they treat me one way. If she goes in, they treat her a different way. And I didn't realize I had that privilege. And I think when we don't realize that we have the privilege, someone has to speak up and say, you do know you have privilege. And so that's part of what the African American Christian Clergy Coalition is about, is making sure that we make voices aware of the things that cause harm or do damage to a community of people. And there is so much there, I think, of in terms of where we are, and we are not at equal yet. We're not there yet. And so there are things, when we look even the disparaging numbers between the white churches and the black churches. Many of the black churches they sheltered in. They shut down because of it. But many of my white counterparts, who I'm in contact with a number of groups with them, they just kept going.
They never stopped having church.
They didn't stop, and because it didn't impact them like it did us. I remember right in March, I think, I found out there was about 17 of the Church of God in Christ leadership who died because they had all attended in that very short period of time, like within the first month. And I'm thinking that was a big hit on our community, because it wasn't just people, it was leadership. And you took a big chunk of all of those leaders with history and knowledge and wisdom, and you wiped it out. And so that devastated us. And so we're still in somewhat of recovery from it, because now we're saying, what does it look like going forward? So that's one of the things I think that when I think about what we're doing as an organization, is to try to fill in those gaps, be able to speak to a number of issues. I think with the election, which I was really grateful for, one of the things that was powerful was that we had more people vote than ever had voted before. I had members who were my age, 60, that identified, this is the first time I've ever voted. How do you not do that? And I think some of it had been discouragement. Some of it had been lack of knowledge. My father, there's no way I could live in my father's house and not vote.
Well, but here's the thing, and a lot of it, you just hit the nail on the head with that, because education is key. And education is not just about learning how to add 2 and 2 equals 4 and making assumptions. Mm-hmm. Because we make a lot of assumptions because people don't necessarily talk about their voting history. And there's a lot of information out there. There's sometimes I think we're just in information overload. And I have conversations with not just millennials, but I'll say this about millennials. Millennials don't have cable. Do you know who keeps the cable companies and the telephone, the home phone people? It's our age group and older. Our generation and older are the ones who have home phones. We're the ones who still pay the satellite cable people. Millennials and younger people, that's not a priority. They're going to make sure that they have the highest internet you could possibly have. They're going to put their money in that. They will get a cell phone. They don't care what plan it's on, because that's not their priority. They're also not as concerned with retirement benefits on their job. So what I found during the shutdown and during the COVID experience, a lot of the millennials, because things were shut down, they were creative. They opened businesses. A lot of them are entrepreneurs. They're very entrepreneurial in their thinking. Their mindset isn't go to college to go work for someone for the rest of your life because you need a retirement. Their mindset is different. So having said that, you talked about the multi-generations that you had to minister to, and you're still ministering to meet the needs. And even the people who are the unchurched, the ones that people don't have any consideration for. because our thoughts is, well, you're not a member of our church. Well, one of the things that COVID did is it didn't matter what church
You were a member of.
belonged to. As a matter of fact, it shifted the paradigm of church membership.
Yes.
It took it to a whole nother level because it gave people an opportunity to look into other things that they may not have had the opportunity to do prior to COVID. And so with this constant frame of information, because of the fact that the internet is, everything is immediate. Before you could preach it, everybody already knew about it. So as a pastor, how were you able to navigate all of those storms? Because that's what I call them. You had the storm of sickness, and it was such a liquid amount of information. Let's just put it that way. So much information. How, as a pastor, do you connect your individual church community, your family community, your the city with the responsibilities as the chairperson of the ministerial alliance? How do you connect all of that, stay relevant, and keep the main thing, keep people focused? Because there's so much information going on. By the time you hear it, it's already old news. So how do you navigate that?
One of the things I think that when people are looking and realizing that people are looking for spiritual answers, and I was enlightened to the fact that I'm not trying to give relevant answers, I'm trying to give spiritual answers. There are many voices that are giving relevant answers. We need to deal with spiritual answers. So when they come, so in that instance, I was thinking and looking at felt needs. And felt needs were the key things. What are the things that are needed now? What are the essentials? Because that's really what we started talking about, were the essentials of life. And so some things that mattered didn't matter anymore during this time. They no longer had the value that they had before. And so we began to look at giving food. So we started doing a food program, identifying where we could get boxes of food, and then making sure that we got the food there to make sure that we distributed it to the community in which our church resided. Other pastors banded together to make sure that we could feed those who were hungry, who could not get them. The number of individuals who could not work because of COVID. Many of the frontline workers now not able to work. What do we do supporting them? And so putting those things. Then we looked at, again, some of the other felt needs is the need for connection. I celebrated the number of individuals who became creative in what they did, going outside, right, and doing things in the community that they had not done. People got to know their neighbors when they didn't get to know their neighbors before, because now this is as far as I go. I go outside, we can talk. We're outside now, so if we're not wearing a mask, at least we're outside. And so it was those kind of things, identifying what were the felt needs when it came to grief. Grieving and understanding what that was. I did a number of funerals trying to identify. One of the challenges we did, one of our programs we talked about as it relates to the African American community, we celebrate when it comes to death. We have this big regalia, everybody comes, we have programs, and what happened in that time was we couldn't do it like that anymore. So how do we help individuals come to closure? Because sometimes it was the celebration that was the closure. And when I can't celebrate mama, or I can't celebrate husband, or whoever, I can't come together. There's only one or two folks in a room, and I'm used to this major event. How do I help meet that need? What are the things that we can do, put in place to help an individual get that? So really trying to identify what those felt needs are, and then being creative in meeting them. Bible study, prayer. We had a 5-day-a-week prayer. Now we're up to 7 days a week. So we had 7 days a week of prayer. That we had the opportunity for folks to call in, and that became the essential, that big place where they connected and they were able to share. And so those are the kinds of things that we tried to do during that season, and some of them have lingered on, and we continue with that.
So I'm glad you mentioned that about prayer, because I was going to ask you, did you guys still have your 24? I know you had your prayer center on campus. So, and the funeral thing is a huge thing, because you're right. It got to the place where they were literally. I mean, I know that we mentioned about reality TV. There's been some reality TVs about the world's greatest funerals and different things that people were shocked, and awed about how funerals were done. But there are places in bigger cities where they actually do have drive-by funerals, where, because the impact of the funeral home is servicing so many people, that they couldn't possibly do viewings the way we're used to. And so one of the things that happened during this season, and even now, you can't just pile everybody into a place. Even though they may or may not be requiring masks, but there is still a capacity, and they're being more mindful about that. And so the grief process, I think, is key, because the loneliness, and I've talked about on this show a lot and had guests come on the show, and we talk about how grief isn't always about death.
Correct.
I know in our communities, we often think about it is who died. Well, you can grieve anything. Grief is basically about mourning the loss of whatever that loss is. And there's steps to it. I had Apostle Gardner on, I think about a month or so ago, and he was talking about the bereavement, because he came when Bishop Robinson passed away. He actually came and ministered to our church on a Wednesday night about grief.
Okay.
And I didn't forget that, because it made an impact. And he still teaches in the community and with the hospice. And it's interesting, because while he was on the show, he talked about probably the biggest challenge he has is in church culture with grieving, because we associate, if you're grieving, somehow you're not operating in faith. Or if you decided that it was best for you and your family to stay in, somehow you're operating in fear. And there's a fine line. And don't get me wrong, I understand, but having that wisdom, like you said, and knowing, giving people the opportunity to choose, and understanding everybody's situation is not the same. And it is a process. And there are those of us who had to get to that point where we felt like, okay, it's okay for me to do. And then there's some people who still don't do anything. You will not catch them out. They will go through the drive-through, but they are not. One of the things I think that the whole COVID experience, and even with the protesting, with the things that happened with George Floyd, and our whole country shifted, everything shifted because of those two seasons colliding.
Correct.
And some of it was old and some of it was new stuff. I think it was more about exposure than it was anything. It wasn't anything new. It's just that finally the whole world got to watch, not just, and it wasn't just here in America. It started a conversation, a multicultural, multilingual conversation all over the world. People started thinking, and not just thinking to themselves, but they started thinking out loud. And one of the things I do when I'm working with individuals or groups, I encourage people to feel, because for so long we have not been allowed to express how we feel. Somehow it's looked at as being disrespectful, especially in our communities and in the church environment. Like the group think, you can't, if you're thinking anything opposite of what the pastors think, somehow you're out of alignment. And that may or may not be true. I'm not here to litigate that. But what I'm talking about is people being given the option to think and really process stuff, because that's just something that we have just not done as a community very well. So bringing this to the here and the now, how, because we're still processing, it's still happening. It may not be happening at the rate it was happening 2 years ago, but here it is, 2022, and now we're still talking about the same things. So what word would you give to the people as we're preparing to close? How would you, if you had to give a word of encouragement to people of faith in our communities, in all the communities, what would be that word of wisdom that you would give to the audience on how to move forward and shift our momentum? How would you do that?
I think you stated it best in this way. And I say it this way: God is not getting ready to do something, He's already doing it. And what He told Moses at the Red Sea, He said, Moses, they're now at the Red Sea, the army is behind them, and they're like, what do we do? What do we do, Ron? And they're fearful. And Moses turns to God and said, God, listen, we need you. And this is the thing that was powerful to me as I heard Moses say, and God say this to Moses: what are you asking me for? He said, use what I gave you. Do what I've given you to do. And I think when we think about what God has given us, there's a number of things that we've been given opportunity and we haven't used it. It's sort of having a key to the car and having gas in the car and you saying, can I go? It's like, you have the power and you have the authority. I need you to move on it. I need you to speak to the things that you said. I've given you that. And you need to speak. You need to be vocal and being able to articulate what God has given you. And so when we think about that, I think to not say anything, and I think that's really where we find ourselves, is that some of us have become complacent. We become complacent in the fact that we have not really believed. When we talk about, Peter said, you need to always be ready with an answer, for which I preach this on Sunday. Be ready with an answer for your hope that you have.
Wow.
Be ready with an answer. Why I do what I do. I need to be ready. What is the substance of things hoped for? It is faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. What are our hopes? What are our hopes and desires as a community? What are our hopes and desires as a people? What are our hopes and desires as a body of believers? Because whatever we do, we need to be able to answer it based on those hopes. And so our expectations will dictate our behavior. So when I vote, when I go in, I expect my vote to count.
All right now.
So I expect to do that. I expect to be able to have my voice heard when there are issues that concern us. When I speak about as a people and collectively, we need to make sure that we come together. Is there or is there not power in unity? When we come together and unify and listen, what God said, listen, these folks in the Tower of Babel, these folks, when they come together into agreement, he said, there's nothing that's impossible with them. He said, so here's the one place where I challenge some folks. He said, I'm going to confuse them.
Wow.
I'm going to create chaos, because in that chaos, they will not have the unity. But then we go to, of course, the Acts, where he brings us back in unity. And you realize that the unity was based on the fact that identify that Jesus came. And when he came into a society that was being oppressed. He did not come as an oppressor. He came as one of the oppressed. And so his voice, his speaking was to those who were oppressed. And what happened was the church folk, the church looked at him and said, you're disrupting the process. You're giving voice to those who we are trying to ostracize and put off to the side. And we're trying to other them. He said, what I need you to do is to come together and realize that unity, when you all come together, and listen, it will only get better for all of us if it gets better for the least of us.
Oh, wait, you didn't drop the bomb on us right here at the time, when it's time to go. You didn't preach, but that's real talk. And he came to his people, the people who were oppressed. He didn't go to another group of people. He went to the people he was sent to. And I appreciate you sharing that, because oftentimes we are afraid to utilize our voices, because either we've been told to shut up, or you don't know what you're talking about, or ostracized for telling the truth, because the truth is relative to the people who want to hear it. And realistically, if we don't come together and start sharing, like such as you're talking about, and finding out what's going on in our communities, that word talking about we perish for a lack of knowledge is not just knowing the word, the way we interpret it.
Yes.
Jesus was very clear on what the law was. He was very clear on the rules in his community. And he came to destruct and to destroy that kingdom that had been erected, that had nothing to do with bringing healing, didn't bring deliverance, didn't bring any peace, didn't bring any joy, any of that. He dealt with the whole religious thinking. And if we don't start saying something, then change won't happen. So in essence, that's what I've heard you say all night. That's what you've been saying over and over again. Haven't you got, they are killing it in the comments. They are loving you. I'm keep calling you Dr. Barnwell. When we gonna see that PhD behind your name?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
They keep putting stuff on my plate. It's like, okay, somebody will have to hold up on some of that until I get through this.
Well, God's he'll orchestrate it all, as you continue to obey him and do his word and his will. He will make room for that, obviously, because if that's what he wants, and we know that that's what he wants for your life. I appreciate you. Tell Lady Linda I'm gonna have her on, because y'all, this husband right here, they are the dynamic duo. Them two. That's what I'm gonna say. Them two.
Dr. Drea.
So, I'm excited for everything that God is doing at New Life. Greater, oh Lord, I didn't rename your church.
First New Life. I went to New Life when I was in Georgia, and I always get those names confused. Artist Singleton is on. I'm Valdosta, Pastor Deborah. Like I said, the whole East Coast group, they're on tonight. They're sitting here watching, and they're excited in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Y'all know, y'all vote. We need the Stella Award. Internet Station of the Year, July 15th through the 17th in ATL. As a matter of fact, Dr. Lady Rain is going to be going to ATL this weekend, hanging out with Apostle Vera Howard. I think she's being honored. Something's going on this weekend. She's going to be in Atlanta for us, so she'll be posting. You guys, I'm telling you, do not miss this opportunity. God is doing so much. If you want your own show here at PRAYzy.FM Radio, y'all know what to do. Y'all know exactly what to do. You too can be hosting your own show. If you want to do that, see Dr. Lady Rain. Wow, God is up to some. They're in the comments blowing it up right now. You didn't stir it up a fire. So we're going to have to plan for you to come back, because they already calling y'all. They calling you back already. So if I can get on his schedule again, y'all, we're going to make this happen. He's a busy man. But I appreciate you, Pastor Barnwell. You've been a friend since day one. You and your wife, we run into them, and we keep saying we're going to go to eat together. We're going to make that happen. We're going to do that.
We are. We've said it for years. We're going to make it happen this year. We got to do this. He's such a wealth of information and legacy. Y'all just don't know. God is about to blow some stuff up. He is blowing it up. He's just been waiting on us to catch fire. He's been blowing it. Now we just got to do something with it. So on that note, I will see you guys. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I will see you next week here, same time, same place, here for the Momentum Shift at PRAYzy.FM Radio. See you next week. Good night.
Best to everybody.
You are tuned in to that PRAYzy station, PRAYzy.FM, where we get our praise on. 24 hours, 7 days a week.